Hey, this is my Over Life again. Okay, this is part 2 of the video. It's basically still the same thing. I just gathered together a couple more papers to show you some things. Okay, I'll continue on with what I was saying. Anyways, I was basically saying that I'm gonna build a fuel injector adapter that will go with my car and electronics and all that exists right now. You don't have to do it exactly the same way that Stan did. It's the concept that matters. Okay, not exactly how we did it. And okay, I'm gonna go back to this right here. Okay, using different voltages, starting at a lower voltage and working your way up to a high voltage. So this is what I was trying to explain. Basically, Stan says that you start it with a lower voltage. It'll align the different molecules. The hydrogen will attract towards the negative plate and the oxygen towards the positive plates. And as you start out with a lower voltage, like he shows right here, it aligns, and then as the voltage increases, it begins to pull apart until it gets to a point where it completely pulls it apart. And by doing it like this in the step charging effect, it does it a lot more efficiently than it would just with a single straight voltage being applied. Say like I was just applying 12 volts, that's it, nothing else. So that's just another paper that I found that shows a representation of that more clearly. Now what I'm going to go on and talk to is this gas processor that he used. Okay, this picture right here is showing basically how the process works for an internal combustion engine to bring the hydrogen gas to the same strength as regular gasoline, so it burns at the same rate. So he uses water, which is changing to the hydrogen oxygen, and then he uses ionized ambient air, and then he uses exhaust gases, which are non-combustible gases. And this is something that I feel is important that people also need to know that they don't understand correctly, is you don't have to inject all of these things through the fuel injector itself. The only thing that's going to be going through the injector itself is the hydrogen and oxygen gases. The hydrogen and oxygen gases are not passed through the gas processor. They are simply passing through the voltage zones in the injector. Okay, they're not emitted to the gas processor, so to the red LEDs in that or anything like that to ionize them. They are done just through your regular electrolysis with the step charging effects and resonance like Stan does, the efficient way of doing it, not brute force with electrolyte and stuff. So that's important for you guys to know, because you can convert his system to run with a regular internal combustion engine by understanding that the injector itself produces the hydrogen oxygen gases, and then what he does is he attaches the gas processor to the air intake on your car, and when the air coming through the intake passes through that gas processor, it ionizes the it's called ambient air, okay? Air coming through your air intake is ambient air. He ionizes that, and it basically knocks off the electrons, making it become more unstable, which increases the explosive power that it has when it's mixed with the hydrogen and oxygen and non-combustible gases. So it puts it at a higher energy state for combustion, is what it does. So the gas processor and the injector, they're not linked together, okay? You don't have the injector and then the gas processor going into the same thing, okay? So in other words, the ambient air that's ionized doesn't inject through the tube that the water came through to go through the injector. The ambient air goes through just like it normally would in any internal combustion engine through the air intake. It's just ionized at the point before it reaches the air intake, okay, so that it knocks off electrons and makes it at a higher energy state. So people need to understand that. And what I'm going to be doing is having a gas processor connected to my air intake. Obviously I'm going to reduce the size of my air intake down to what is needed, because you can't over dilute the mixture of hydrogen and oxygen. Hydrogen and oxygen already has enough oxygen there to burn. You don't really need much ambient air going into the mixture, but what you do need as far as the ambient air is it does need to be ionized to increase the energy of the explosion in the hydrogen. By doing that, when you add in the non-combustible gases that are recirculated and fed in through the system from your exhaust, they're captured from your exhaust, that brings it down to the burning level of gasoline once you get the mixture right, and that's what I'm going to be doing. So this right here is the gas processor, and it looks basically, you know, when Stan takes it apart on his car, it looks pretty similar to this. And you just have your lasers right here shooting through. It's a red type of a laser that helps knock off the electrons, and then it also passes through a high voltage zone, the same type of a zone as what he uses in his injector. Okay, so it's still a a step charging effect in the gas processor between the positive and negative plates or zones in the gas processor. So what the gas processor does is it emits a red light at a specific frequency, and so the ambient air is passing through that zone of light while passing through a zone of electricity. So you have a positive and negative zone of high voltage with a step charging voltage. As that ambient air passes through that, it knocks off electrons, it makes them unstable, and then he has an amp consuming device attached, which is basically an LED that captures those electrons that have been ejected from the ambient air, thus keeping them in an unstable state, ready and primed for combustion. So that's this couple things that I believe people misunderstand that Stan's doing, and that they really do need to understand in order for us to be able to make this work. So those are some things that I'm going to be working on. I'm going to be making my own injection system, tying into the existing injectors in my car, passing water through them and through an adapter that I have created in the process of designing still, to make it so that hydrogen is produced right at that point at the injector, just as standard with this spark plug injector. The hydrogen and oxygen were produced at the injector point. Okay, so at this tip right here is when the hydrogen and oxygen were created. The gases were created right here. They weren't created in a separate chamber. It all took place in the injector, right here at the end of the injector, in that zone. That's the only place that the hydrogen and oxygen were created with his design. So it's going to work the same way with mine. The only place that the hydrogen and oxygen is going to be created is in that adapter that I have, that I'm designing for my fuel injector to attach to, that's shooting water through it, through that voltage zone, and then it's sending that hydrogen and oxygen into my cylinder, while at the same time I have the gas processor connected to my air intake, destabilizing the atoms there and allowing that to pass through, knocking the electrons off, and being mixed in just as it regularly would through your air intake, but with ionized ambient air into my cylinder. And I'm going to have to figure out what those ratios are of the ionized ambient air, the non-combustible gases, and the hydrogen and oxygen. So Stan actually says here in his book, I think it's in section 7, the exact amount of water that he uses through his injector for his 1500cc or whatever engine that he was using. It's extremely small. It's like 0.7 microliters or something like that, and then it's like 47 microliters for a 8-cylinder 300 and something horsepower diesel engine. So he does give those ratios in his book, I think in section 7, that you guys can go through and find. So if I find them, then I'll show you and let you know. I'll note it in the video. It's the point that I do find it. But those are some important things that you guys need to know, and some things that I'm going to be working on after I get my gas vaporizer done. And so I hope that you guys can learn a little bit from this, as I've learned from Stan's stuff. He has a lot of great stuff, and you don't have to replicate exactly what he does. It's the concepts that you need that matter, okay? It's not the exact identical replication. So, it's Tyson with Show for Life. Please comment, rate, subscribe, share your ideas, all that kind of stuff, because everything matters, you know. I'm not the only one that can do this. You guys all have to take part in it. So share your ideas, you know, get involved in any way that you can, and make videos or whatever you feel the need is. So, Tyson with Show for Life. Peace out, have fun, be safe, guys. Take care. Till next time. Bye.